Good afternoon, welcome and thank you for joining our webinar today. So today's webinar we're focusing on the value of tourism to UK businesses, and we're going to guide you through our top tips for attracting international shoppers and their spending power. Your presenters today. So my name is James and I'll be your host today. I work within the channel team looking after our partners across e-commerce, moto and face-to-face payments. I'm really pleased to be joined today by two industry experts that are going to guide us through today's webinar. Firstly, let me introduce Gary Grieve, who is founder of Capella China, a company which offers training to UK businesses and retailers to help them make the most of Chinese visitors. Gary's worked with shopping villages like the Trafford Centre and York Designer Outlet, but also specialist retailers such as Amiga and Ernest Jones. Gary and I are joined by Fiona Fenton-Smith, who is Head of Marketing at MoneySwap. They provide merchants with the ability to accept UnionPay in-store and online. MoneySwap work with Visit Britain, City of London Corporation, and retailers include H. Samuel, Museum of London, and Westfield shopping centres. So thank you both very much for joining us today. Today's webinar, we really want it to be as interactive as possible, so please don't hesitate to get involved. If you do have any questions at all, please use the Q&A box, which you should find displayed on the bottom right corner of your screen. We're also running a small competition today, so if you retweet about the webinar, please use hashtag SPTips, that's SPTips, not PGTips, and then we'll randomly select a winner to win a £25 Amazon voucher. So SagePay, who we are. Most of you are likely to be familiar with SagePay, but I'll touch briefly about who we are. We're part of the Sage Group, which is a FTSE 100 company, and we deliver payment technology solutions to help merchants effectively run their businesses. As you can see, we process millions of secure payments every year for over 50,000 customers, providing technical support 24/7, 365 days a year. Our focus now and for the future is to continue streamlining the acceptance of payments, whether that's in-store, online or mobile. We're very much looking at a multi-channel view. It's about providing a simple, fast and more secure way to accept payments in order to ultimately reduce your costs and increase revenue. So why we're all here today, tourism and the international shopper. Since 2010, tourism has been the fastest growing sector in the UK. Industry forecasts say it's going to be worth 257 billion by the year 2025. So it's hugely important for retailers to adopt the latest in-store payment facilities in order to allow their customers to pay in their local currency and also reap the rewards of tax-free shopping. Over 34 million tourists visited the UK in 2014 alone. Average spend of each visit was over £600, so it just shows how tourism is booming at the minute. You may not speak your customer's language, but you can promote and offer a choice of payment options and benefits to attract the international shopper. So it's about offering familiar payment options. So what we've learned is convenience is key. Customers want to pay in a way that is familiar to them, and that's where SagePay come in. With our focus on tourism, and in particular the Chinese shopper, UnionPay acceptance should be your #1 priority. With SagePay, we can provide your payment gateway to quickly and easily start accepting UnionPay. So you can attract more Chinese customers to your store, enhance their experience, and also increase revenue. Just to touch broadly on our card-present solutions, SagePay work with all UK acquirers and offer a range of integrated payment solutions for the retail, hospitality and leisure industries. We accept all major card schemes, including MasterCard, Visa, Amex, Diners, JCB and of course UnionPay. We provide fully contactless enabled devices, and we're accredited for high value contactless, including Apple Pay and what will be Samsung Pay and Android Pay. We also offer tax-free shopping and dynamic currency conversion. So it's about localizing the global shopper. So just to touch further on to the functionalities we've already mentioned, dynamic currency and tax-free shopping, which are ultimately key in tourism retailing. So dynamic currency conversion It just improves customer experience by converting the sale into their local currency, which will be displayed on the payment terminals. This allows shoppers to clearly identify the price they're paying in their currency. It gives them the option to either pay in their local currency using a competitive exchange rate or pay in the local, which would be pounds or euros. If we then move on slightly to tax-free shopping, it's exactly that. It enables shoppers to claim back the tax paid on their purchases when leaving the EU and returning home. SagePay works with specialist TFS companies including Global Blue, EU Tax-Free and GB Tax-Free. This allows international consumers to claim up to 90% back on everything they purchase. So it's not only great for customers, it will be great for merchants. Firstly, customers can get a discount on their purchases, but merchants, it's a way of attracting the international shopper into their stores. We've had some interesting statistics through from one of our partners, Global Blue, as they've recently announced that they've witnessed a 75% spike in spending by Chinese tourists during the first 6 months of this year, and a 72% increase in August alone, the month when the Chinese currency was devalued and equity prices plummeted. So it just shows how the tourism sector is really growing at the minute. Merchants like yourselves must act now in adopting the latest payment trends and functionality. Attract the international shopper and reap the financial rewards. As you can see on screen, there are a few of the merchants we work with: Burberry, Ted Baker and Vivienne Westwood. So please act now. I'm now going to hand over to Gary Grieve, who's going to talk about Propeller China and what they do.
Thank you, James. So my name is Gary. I run a business called Propeller China. We offer a variety of services in the China space, specifically training and preparing businesses, UK businesses in tourism, attractions, hotels, accommodation, and retailers in how to get the most out of their Chinese market, out of their Chinese business. So let's talk about China. It's the most populous country in the world. It's got a population of 1.4 billion. So that's 1 in 5 people in the world are Chinese. And we're going to talk about tourism specifically because this is the big story and staggering story of the last 15 years. If you look at the chart there, you'll see that in the year 2000, there were 10 million Chinese crossing the border out of China into other countries. By 2010, that had gone up to over 50 million, and then it went from 50 to 100 million in the next 4 years. You look at the sharp angle of increase, and you'll see that by 2020, there'll be 200 million Chinese traveling outside the country. So the increase that there's been is quite staggering, but it's going to continue for a long time to come. One of the reasons it's going to continue is because actually only 6% of Chinese currently have a passport. So there's well over 1 billion people out there who still want to travel and don't yet have the opportunity. So there's lots more to come. Apart from the fact there are a lot of them, the other thing characteristic about Chinese travellers is they spend more than anybody else. So we like them doubly. There are, on this chart, you can see over the period from the mid-2000s up till about a year ago, you see the Chinese growth on the orange spike there, going straight upwards. The Chinese that visit the UK on average spend 3 times as much as other travellers do from other countries, and so you've got this double whammy of lots and lots more people and increasing all the time and spending more than anybody else. And to the UK, the numbers are a lot smaller than they are worldwide because we're a long way from China, but they're increasing very steadily, as you can see here over the last few years. About an 18% increase last year, and the early signs for this year are very strong as well. So it's going to continue, again, for some time to come. Now, one thing to consider about China is because it's a very big place and it's very diverse, and there are lots of different types of traveller, and they are emerging and developing all the time. So in the few minutes we've got, I'm going to focus on some of the characteristics of some different types of traveller, namely package tourists, independent travellers, and students, albeit students you may say they're not tourists and they're not in the traditional sense, but I'll explain to you the importance of them. I'm sure many of you have seen it in your stores already. Package tourists then. Package tourists are probably the most visible manifestation of the Chinese travelling. You see groups of them walking around airports, following behind their leader. They are very visible in their spending. They're very noticeable in places like this very happy-looking lady here in Vista Village, who's made her purchases, and in malls like that, which are very convenient to the package tour way of travelling and moving around. They do particularly well. But they do buy all sorts of other things besides just designer goods, albeit they do like their designer goods, and there is a tendency quite often for package tourists to buy the same thing as each other sometimes. It's seen as an affirmation of the good taste of your neighbour if you buy the same thing as them. So quite often you'll see tendencies, as you see in this picture with these ladies. On this chart, you've got a view of some of the brands that they buy, and obviously that's one of the things they're particularly known for, and they are the big French brands, Hermès, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, and so on, as you would expect, that are near the top, Italian brands like Gucci. But the important thing for the Chinese is that they buy them in Europe or outside China, because in China there's a great mistrust of brands and an assumption that they're likely to be fake. So it's quite acceptable to buy international European brands when you're in the UK. That's fine. But that's not all that they buy. In the case of package tourists, they very often come from communities where it's accepted and it's normal to buy gifts for all the family and possibly neighbours when you return. So there is a great taste for souvenirs, things which are characteristic of the place. So if it says London, or it says the name of the city, or the UK, or it's a phone box, or whatever it is. So things like these key rings, that might be, quite low value items. You may find that a Chinese tourist comes in and might buy 10 or 15 of them for all the children in the neighbourhood, and then possibly another 5 of them or 10 of them come along. They all buy the same thing. You suddenly go through 100 or 200 of the same item in your stock. So there are quite different levels and different rationales for motivations for the purchase that they made. Looking at independent travellers, these are rather a different kettle of fish. The wealthiest independent travellers in China, generally speaking, are younger people, unlike many other nations. So 25 to 35-year-olds typically. Very often people who've been international students, they've gone back to China, have got good jobs, they have disposable income, they like to travel. You can see from their style they're a bit more Western, a little bit less possibly brand obsessed in a way, and maybe a bit more mainstream. However, there are some very key characteristics to the kind of purchasing that independent travellers display, and they do want to distinguish themselves from their sort of country cousins, if you like, and be a bit different in the kind of things that they buy. They very much do like to shop. They go to places like Harrods. All Chinese like to be seen outside Harrods. It's as much a tourism visit as it is a purchasing visit, but it fulfills both functions. And they like to look good, and they like to buy their own brands as well, but they won't necessarily buy the obvious ones that the package tourists might buy, and may go for something a little unusual, with a maybe a more quirky or lesser known brand. And here's one of the characteristics. If you have a look at the shot that's on the screen now, you can see a pair of cufflinks there, £1,000, but here's the key. There's a limited edition of only 50 pairs, and that's the kind of thing, exclusivity, something different, not being one of the crowd, but being something slightly different from the crowd. That's what distinguishes the independent traveller, generally speaking, from the package tourist. On to students, and again we have lots and lots of Chinese students in the UK, and you can't always instantly distinguish between students and tourists when they walk into your store necessarily, but there are roughly 100,000 leisure travellers that come a year to this country, and roughly 100,000 Chinese students in the UK, so there are an awful lot of them. They're staying a lot longer than the tourists are. So obviously they come to study and they pretty much blend in. And you look at these guys and they're dressed much the same as anybody else. But you've got to remember that Chinese students that come to the UK come from the wealthier families and will generally have a lot more disposable income than your British students will have. And they do things while they're here. They take the opportunity to be tourists, to travel around themselves and do the things that tourists do. And guess what? They like to shop as well. And they have the flexibility that tourists sometimes don't have, that they can find bargains, they can find sales, they have more time, they do an awful lot of research on the internet, particularly very internet savvy, find out about prices and availability. This shot is from Selfridges in Oxford Street on Boxing Day, as the doors open for the Boxing Day sale, and look at the joy on their faces. Aren't those people happy to be flooding through the doors? And guess what? Every single one of them is Chinese. So you will find that Chinese students play an important role in the the whole ecosystem of tourism. Their friends come and visit them, their relatives, their parents come and stay with them, and so on. So you will find around Chinese students there's a lot of tourism and a lot of purchasing as a consequence of that. So I'll wrap up with 5 top tips based on some of the things that I've talked to you about. First one is to assess your customer journey. Have a look at your customers, analyze what type of customer they are, how long do they spend in the store. Remember, package tourists are usually in and out, maybe in half an hour, 45 minutes. Are you geared to them arriving at the time that they're there, and are you making it easy for them and putting the products they want in places they can find them easily? Stock the right products in the right quantities. Observe your customers, see what it is that they want, what it is that they're looking for. You might choose to have a less broad range of products and a deeper stock of the things that they do buy. Take the example of the key rings, for example. Be prepared for shopping peaks. Think about timing. You'll probably find a package tour that they're on a tour around the country. They stop at the same time of day each time. They pass through. Make sure you're staffed up at that time. Make sure that you've got the goods in and that you're ready at the time that they come. This is a big one, but it sounds like a big one, but it's not as hard as it sounds. Use Mandarin language. The Chinese will very much appreciate and feel very welcomed. Even if you put a few signs up with pointers, it will help you to control the flow through the store and signpost people in the right direction. With staff, if you can learn 5 or 6 words of Chinese and say ni hao and say hello to them and that kind of thing, they'll very much appreciate that too. And finally, get UnionPay from MoneySwap. You're going to hear more about that in just a second from Fiona. And I will leave you there. That says thank you in Chinese, share. Thank you very much. If there's anything more you want to know from me, have a look at the website there, cabelachina.com, and I will pass you over to Fiona.
Thank you, Gary. So my slot this afternoon is to discuss with you, or to explain to you about China's Golden Week. So Golden Week is a 7-day national holiday. It begins with National Day on the 1st of October, so that's in 7 days' time. There are 3 days of paid holiday given by the government, and surrounding weekends are arranged so that workers in Chinese companies always have 7 days of continuous holiday. They were primarily started to promote domestic tourism, and consequently there are now periods of heightened travel activity. So as Gary mentioned, there are key, we've seen the growth of outbound Chinese travel now, and around 200 million Chinese are expected to travel overseas during peak holiday seasons. So Golden Week is becoming increasingly important for long-haul trips, and Europe are seeing numbers rise. So the Chinese traditionally have always travelled to places like Japan, Australia is becoming more accessible, and Europe. And this year, particularly with the loosening of visa regimes, we expect to see more. Activities are run during this period by major brands and shopping centres in various cities such as London, Manchester and Birmingham. one of the key areas of these cities is that they have existing Anglo-Chinese communities, and they also tend to have a large number of Chinese students. So if you're thinking of marketing to the Chinese customer, this is a good time to do some localized campaigns, and it's a really good testing ground to understand behaviors, types of products, as Gary said in his top tips. So if you're based in and around these areas, it's a good time next week to go and have a look and get to understand behaviors, etc. So why UnionPay? Well, first of all, I'll explain what UnionPay is. UnionPay is China's only domestic bank card. The Chinese version is basically the Chinese version of Visa and MasterCard. Most Chinese have at least two in their wallet. That's a debit and a credit card. They spend with debit whatever is in their bank account. So whilst the Chinese government have a restriction on cash being taken out of the country, by accepting UnionPay, the Chinese shopper can spend limitless amounts of money. It is a hugely trusted brand, so 100% brand recognition in China. We're also seeing a balancing of spending with a rise in discretionary spend as more UK merchants are accepting UnionPay. So that means that it used to be the rather large ticket items that might be paid for on credit card, but we're now seeing things like sort of drinks and snacks with being paid with cards. But big ticket items are still popular, with watches and engagement rings being the most popular. So, and also with a limit on ATMs for cash withdrawal, accepting UnionPay credit cards is really the way forward. As you can see from Scott, the chart on the screen, UnionPay's dominance is spreading outside of Asia. By accepting UnionPay, you can improve your Chinese customer spending experience by presenting them with a payment option that they recognise and they trust. So that wraps up our portion of today's webinar. I'm going to pass you over to James, who's going to wrap up.
Thank you, Fiona, and thank you, Gary. That was fantastic. We hope you all enjoyed it as well. Just before we get on to some of the Q&A, I'd just like to touch again on Golden Week, as we're actually running a competition at the minute. So if you do retweet, as the link shown on screen, your small business could be in with a chance of winning up to £1,000. But what we've also done is we put a selection of great guides, tips and advice on our website, which you can access from the link on screen. So please feel free. So if we just move on now to some of the Q&A. Of course, if you'd like to discuss anything we talked about today with a SavePay specialist, or of course our guest today, please just call the number on screen and we'd be more than happy to talk to you. So firstly, some of the questions we've had. Obviously, I'd also just like to apologise for the echo that was on the line when we started. I hope that didn't affect any of your experiences too much. So first question then. Aside from Golden Week, are there any other big Chinese tourist shopping occasions that we should know about? So I guess this is over to you, Fiona or Gary.
Thanks, James. That's a good question. The key period is clearly Golden Week. That's next week. The Chinese New Year, which in 2016 will be February the 8th. It follows the lunar calendar, so the New Year is never on exactly the same day. I think also we're seeing a big importance on graduation dates, so that sort of July and September period. And what happens there will be all the friends of close family will come over to see their child graduating from university. And on the same note, in the same vein, September and October, when new students start the new term, is key because families will come over, bed them in, and they can stay for considerable amounts of time, up to really quite a few weeks to a month, to make sure their children are feeling sort of safe and comfortable in their new homes.
Thank you, Fiona. That was great. Another question we've had in is based around smaller boutiques or independent retailers, and what opportunities there are for these types of merchants that might not stock the international or the luxury brands, if you like. I guess this ties in a little bit what you were talking about,
Sure.
Gary.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, there's an increasing awareness of independent brands amongst the independent travellers, as you'd expect. So it's not so well known and they're not so visible, but with the rise of the amount of students that there are here, and the students they're like mini ambassadors. You know, they go back from the UK, they've spent a year here, they find shops, they find things that are different, and they go back, tell their friends about them, they put messages up on their social media sites about them, and the message gets out. And what is important to those visitors is authenticity. And if it's something that is particularly unique to a local area, or to, you know, it's very, very British, not in the sort of flag waving sense of having a Union Jack all over it, but independent brands can do very, very well on that basis if they're good and they capture the imagination.
Brilliant, thank you for that. I think we've got time for one more question, which is just coming around the hospitality side. So we've obviously focused a lot on retail, but is there just as big an opportunity for merchants who obviously specialise in the food and beverage industry? So I guess the question here is, again, do the Chinese dine out a lot like us Brits do?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and that's one that's kind of developing, a developing story. The Chinese, traditionally, if you like, and this whole thing has only been going on for 8 or 10 years, but until very recently, most Chinese would eat in Chinese restaurants by and large when they were here, and that's a sort of packaged tourist behaviour. But that's changing again with independent travellers, and they're opening their eyes to new types of cuisine. There's a news item on the BBC about a seafood restaurant in Brighton, where there was a blogger from China, a sort of celebrity chef who went and ate in the seafood restaurant in Brighton, wrote a blog about it, and now it's full of Chinese going there to try that out. And it's English seafood, so there's no reason why not. They like to take photos of their food as well, but they do eat it generally. So yeah, there are a lot of opportunities there, as their taste is getting more sophisticated, if you like.
Brilliant, thank you. Very insightful. Unfortunately, that's the last question we've got time for today. However, the questions we have had that we haven't answered, we will get back to you on a one-to-one basis. So please bear with us. But thank you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed it.